metropolis of 1.7 million people. And all that growth happened despite a really tragic event that happened here in 1871. Does anybody know what happened here in 1871? The Great Chicago Fire. That's right. Burnt down our whole downtown. As tragic as it was, it gave us a clean slate. Architects, engineers came from all over the world, and they came to design a new type of building, and that was a skyscraper. So let's start talking about the buildings. So over on your right-hand side of the boat, right behind the bridge, you see this white building with a clock tower. This is the Wrigley Building, finished in 1921, the left block, right block in 1924, and it was built as the world headquarters for Wrigley Chewing Gum. Anybody's ever had the juicy fruit government? This was the world headquarters. They jokingly called this a monument to the human jaws when it was finished. This building takes its inspiration from history. Graham, Anderson, Cokes, and White were the architects, and the history is the clock tower, which is based on La Hirota Tower in Seville, Spain. Now that white stone you see is actually terracotta, much like your flower pots at home. It's cooked earth. But unlike stone, it costs less, it weighs less, and it's truly an artist's material because you can color it, mold it, shape it, any design you want. We learned after the Great Chicago Fire that terracotta made an excellent fireproof material that became very important to us after the fire. So we're going to talk about different types of architecture on this tour. I want to bring your attention to the right-hand side of the boat. This glass and steel building with fidelity at the base. This is the Equitable Building, finished in 1965, designed by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. And this is what we call mid-century modernism. This is what we built here in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Using modern materials, mainly steel and glass, square box, flat roof. There's no reference to history on this building like you see on the Wrigley Building, no ornamentation. And because there's no reference to history, you can see this building in any city, in any country. It's also referred to as the international style. We'll talk more about mid-century modern later on this tour. Now, the oldest thing you can see within view right now is this bridge right in front of us. It's from 1920. And I know people from Asian and European countries are like, 1920, really? We did have a fire, remember? But this bridge was designed by a man named Edward Bennett. Now, Edward Bennett worked with a brilliant architect and urban planner by the name of Daniel Burnham. Daniel Burnham was tired of Chicago being referred of meatpacker of the Midwest. He wanted us to be known as Paris on the Prairie. But he knew in order for that to happen, we had to have a master plan for our city, laying out a sense of order, parks, boulevards. So he worked with Edward Bennett, on the Chicago Plan of 1909. And this bridge was part of that plan. It was finished in 1920. And when it was finished, it was a kind of combined. Downtown was very commercial. On the other side was very industrial. A lot of warehouses and factories. So when it was finished, the first commercial building to be finished was the Wrigley Building. And now we call this our magnificent mile going down Michigan Avenue. So we are taking off now. So as we go down the main branch of this tour, I'm going to talk about buildings on the left-hand side of the boat. So I want to draw your attention to a building with a big temple at the top, right by the bridge. It's kind of curving with columns and a big Greek temple at the top. This building today is called London House Chicago, but when it was finished in 1923, it was called the London Guarantee and Accident Company. This was a British insurance company that insured boats on this very busy harbor. It was designed by a man named Alfred Alschuler, a Chicagoan, and the style of architecture is called Beaux Art, which is French for beautiful or fine art. This is the type of architecture that was studied in Paris at the École des Beaux-Arts. That's where early American architects went to study before we had architecture schools here. And in Beaux Art, they get their inspiration from ancient Greece, ancient Rome. So you notice they got the columns at the top, and you see that big Greek temple. It's called a Belvedere, which translates in beautiful view. So now this building is what we call an example of adaptive reuse. So for about 100 years, it was an office building. It ran its course. About 3 years ago, they converted it into a boutique hotel called London House. A firm named Guest Partners did the renovation. Now the city did not want the entrance to this hotel to be right at this very busy corner of Michigan and Wacker. So as we get a little more around the corner, you're going to see a big glass building. That was the addition that Guest Partner designed, which was the London House on the top. And I love how Guest didn't even try to compete with the Beaux-Art architecture. They went a totally different direction. You got a glass front. This is the entrance into this hotel, and that's where they put all the mechanicals on that side. And at the top where you see that Greek temple, there's a nice rooftop bar with great views. And if you got a lot of money, you can rent out that temple for about $1,000 an hour. And then the next two buildings, you see that one with the Gothic rocket right after it. That's Mather Tower from 1928. That's also converted into a hotel. And then Wyndham is also a hotel that's from 1958. And as someone had told me is a Batman fan, Dark Knight, Bruce Wayne's penthouse was the 39th floor of the Wyndham Hotel. So another beautiful Beaux-Art building is this beige building with the 4 temples on the corner and the big Greek temple at the top here. When this building was finished in 1926, it was called the Jewelers Building because jewelers were its main tenants. Now, I know some New Yorkers on the boat. This was designed by Frederick Dinkelberg, who earlier in his career had designed the Flatiron Building, and there's a Burnham company. Now, jewelers love this building because it has special amenities. They could drive their car right into the building at Lower Wacker Drive, take the elevator up to the floor, and safely unload their jewels. Now, this was during Prohibition. That was, for those who don't know American history, there was something you could not legally do during Prohibition, and that was drink alcohol. So there are a lot of things going on where I feel safe. But you did the right place to go during Prohibition, you could get a drink. And that temple on the top was one of those places. It was a very famous speakeasy called the Stratosphere Lounge. And people always ask me after the tour, hey, do you still use those car elevators? I think only one is working, and they use it for cargo. So now as we're passing, we look at the riverbank. This is our new beloved river walk. The part we're passing right now is the oldest. It's from 2005. This is a Vietnam Veteran Memorial. This whole river walk is designed by Crow Ross Barney and Sasaki Associates. In Chicago, we've always embraced our lakefront river, not so much because it's been a dirty industrial canal. But last 30 years, it's started to change. But before we could build this river walk, we had to go in front of Congress because we wanted to adjust the width of the navigation channel by putting these walkways underneath the bridges. And this river walk is 1.25 miles, and it's a series of 7 rooms. The rooms are defined by the bridges. This is the marina we're passing right now, so if you've got a boat or yacht, you can tie it up. And this one is a different personality. It becomes a very good place to come. It's whole river walk. So the next two buildings we're going to talk about have Chicago context. So if you look to the left, you got this glass with reflective glass. If you look up, there's a little triangle pediment on the top. This is 77 West Wacker, designed by Catalonian architect Ricardo Bofill, finished in 1992. Now, this is what we call postmodern architecture. So after 30 years of that mid-century modernism, which is less is more, architects started saying, now less is a bore, let's have fun with our buildings again. So they started reintroducing historical elements kind of on an exaggerated form. So if you look at the top, that Greek pediment, even on the top of the Art Institute of Chicago, also heard this building called Parthenon on steroids. And the building next to it looks like a ribbon going through it. The glass building with a ribbon going through it right next to it. That's 111. That's a contemporary building finished in 2014 by Handel Partners. So contemporary buildings tend to have local context. So that ribbon you see going through it is supposed to represent the Chicago River. And this part of the Chicago River we're passing now is called the Cove. So if you have a kayak or canoe, it's supposed to be level, so you can just get right up to the bank and grab a drink. And the next part of the riverbank is called the theater. Sometimes they'll have barges playing music. Right now we're at the theater, they're all kind of meetups. But right next to that, you'll see that right behind the theater, you see that limestone building with the flag at the base. You look up, this is the LaSalle Wacker building, 1930, designed by Hullerberg and Root. Now the shape of this building is a result of a zoning ordinance we passed in 1923. Because we were building these big, soaring buildings in the 1920s, and people were afraid with all these tall buildings down the street, that you're going to walk down the street and there's no way the sun was going to get down to the street level. So they said, okay, you can build a tall building, but you have to push back the facade as you go up. And architects came with this ingenious design where you put this chair or throne-like shape, and you actually solves two problems that architects had in the early 20th century. How do you bring light and air into a building before we had air conditioning? And although we didn't have electricity, we did not have fluorescent lighting. Light bulbs were like 18-watt bulbs. This allowed more light and air into the building. The building on the left now is called the Builders Building. This was built over a period of 60 years. The left part from 1927, Skidmore, Owings, and Graham Anderson, Coates and White. And the right side, 60 years later, 1986, Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, who united the top with the whole building, united the whole building with a 4-story glass mansard roof. Now this was called the Builders Building because in the 1920s, Chicago economic office space literally doubled up. And now we're back to very loud. Two towers with spires. Those two towers are supposed to represent the Chicago bridge houses. And if you look, there's a Chicago bridge between the two bridges. And if you look straight down about 10 stories, you see a flat dish. That's a shout out to Frank Lloyd Wright, who liked to use urns in his prairie-style residential designs. This is from Cohen, Pedersen, and Fox from 1989. They also designed the Greenish building coming up. This is from 1983. This is often voted Chicagoans' favorite building. It's called 333 West Wacker. And this building is truly what they call a contextual building. It's built for this spot, in this city, and nowhere else. Like, look at the two shades of green on this glass. Much like the color of our beloved Chicago River. And believe it or not, we even dye this river greener at St. Patrick's Day. And I want you to look at the shape. You see, the building reflects the shape of the land that it sits on. But look at the granite at the very bottom. You don't see any windows. So to the right, if you see that elevated train, it's almost like it was timed correctly for this spot here, going by. So in 1983, we didn't have those quiet windows that let out sound. So the developer's saying there's no way I'm going to be able to rent out those lower floors. So that's where they put all the mechanicals. And this is the final part of the river walk. So now we're at the confluence of the Chicago River. This is where the three branches of the Chicago River meet. We're in the main branch now. The right is the north branch, the left is the south branch. And straight ahead is one of our, actually these two are our newest buildings to the Chicago River. The one straight ahead, I know we have some St. Louis folks, that arch must look a lot like your great arch. But the architects, Richard Chilton calls them parabolic cuts. Now, nothing was built here in this area for over 100 years because it was kind of built, it was kind of deemed unbuildable because this is where all the railroad tracks go. And they're like, how do we put this on here? So they pushed it back. And where you see this beige platform, that is a rooftop garden built over the railroad tracks. And you see those portholes with fans that's bringing the exhaust off the train tracks. And on top of it is a beautiful 2.5-acre park, and the cuttings are parabolic cuts. So we are heading into the north branch of the Chicago River. This whole area in front of us is called River North. Until the 1970s, it was very highly industrial warehouses, but now it's become the hip place to live, with restaurants. So straight ahead on the left side, you see a pink building. That is the oldest building we're going to see on this tour. It's from 1898.
Did you get it?
When it was finished in 1898, it was called Fulton House. Excuse me, it's called Fulton House now. It's called North America Cold Storage Company. It was one big giant freezer. And a man named Jerry Weiss in 1981 converted it into apartments and condos. So what's the first thing you do when you buy a freezer? You got to defrost it, right? Well, it took 6 months to defrost this building. It took another year to take out all the insulation, which was matted horsehair and cork. They filled up 500 semi-trailers. And when it defrosted, the building started cracking. So where you see those stars on the front, Those are at the end of reinforced steel rods reinforcing the building. And of course, when you buy a freezer, it doesn't have windows or balconies, so they had to cut those poles out, and they're 4 feet thick, which makes it a very quiet building to live in. So Erie Weeks, the architect who did the renovation for this, he'd been on the Danube River in Europe, and he thought, saw the river cottages, and oh, how lovely, Chicago should have one. So he built the next river cottages coming out. There's 4 of them. They're called river cottages, and when they were finished in 1988, these people were true urban pioneers, because not too many people wanted to live on the Chicago River. There's 4 townhouses. There was a sailor. This is very nautical. You got the triangles for the sails. You got the portholes. Each one has their own boat slip. They all have their own balcony. And none of these went into public for sale until like 2.5 years ago. And when it went on the market, it was only on the market for 1 week, and it was a fixer-upper. That's all it is. And it was sold for $2.25 million. Helping change this whole neighborhood is this blue barn on the right side. This is the East Bank Club, finished in 1979, designed by Ezra Gordon and Jack Levin. And when this building was finished, it's a high-end health club. There were no windows on the back of this building because the river wasn't an amenity. It had its back to the building. The windows were put in later. So 1979, when this building was finished, that was the same year the Chicago Tribune wrote Chicago's Friendless River article. And then a new group was formed after that article called Friends of the Chicago River, who've been very active about putting pressure on the city and state about cleaning up the river. So contrast what's going up on the right side to what's going up on the left side. These are called Pittsy Park, finished in 2002. These townhomes are embracing the river. Everyone has a balcony or a terrace. This is from Papa George Kames. Big thing within 20 years. But notice the beloved Riverwalk in front of it. So our Mayor Daley went down to San Antonio, loved their Riverwalk, came back to our city council and kind of pressured them to pass that you had to require any new buildings of Riverwalk. So since 1998, we've got a lot of new Riverwalks in Chicago. And we love our green space any way we can get it.
Yeah.
Over on the right-hand side, coming up, this red building with the hanging balconies. This used to be an old railroad terminal warehouse, finished in 1909, designed by Nivens and Fellows. But in 1995, it was converted into residential. It's called Riverbank Lofts. And you can see the hanging balconies. That's kind of a clue that a building has gone residential when you see the hanging balconies. And I get this question all the time from a lot of Southerners, like, really, Chicago? We know how cold it gets here in the winter. How many months can you use your balconies? What, 3 months? And the answer is 12, because we have the right coats. I know, I'm out there in January. Now, if you look, though, they do not have a river walk, because this building was converted 3 years before the mandate, so they weren't required. So if you look straight ahead, we got the Ohio Bridge coming up, and you can see how the steel holds that bridge together horizontally. Well, there was an architect here in Chicago who took that concept and converted it to a skeletal steel skyscraper. The first skeletal steel skyscraper was here in Chicago, 1884, Illinois Home Insurance Company. It was designed by a man named William Jennings. So many people don't know his name. We'll just smell that up there. Chocolate smells. So there's a cocoa processing plant just to the left, a couple blocks called the family since 1939. They make chocolate for the undisclosed bakeries from all over the country. But every so often you get a nice stretch. But I like to point it out. But William Jennings taught Daniel Burnham, Louis Sullivan, a lot of famous architects. So over on the right, we got this bluish gray building with the upside-down V's. This is designed by Lucien Lagrange. It's called Arianda Park in 2002. And those chevrons, those are the upside-down V's, are actually structural. And because they have the structure on the outside, the inside, there's less columns for the people who live in those condos. But this building sits on the beloved Montgomery Ward Park. And I think every Chicagoan should know who Montgomery Ward is, because I call him an unsung Chicago hero. Now, everybody here on the boat, I'm sure, has heard of Amazon.com, right? Well, before we bought from Amazon, we bought from catalogs, and this guy started it. He invented it. So he started as a traveling salesman for Marshall Fields, and realized that people in the rural community, they're getting ripped off, they have access to good goods. If they are, they're paying a lot of money. Satisfaction wasn't guaranteed. So in 1872, he started the first mail order catalog. It was one page, and by 1899, it was a 1,000-page catalog. Everybody's heard of Sears Roebuck. They were the biggest, but Montgomery Ward, he was the first. Now, I call him an unsung Chicago hero, because remember when I said in the beginning we built that canal, the I&M Canal, that made a new shipping route in 1848? Well, we needed to raise money for that. So the state started selling off the land in Illinois, and the guys who did the map in 1836 did the area that is now Millennium Park and Grand Park. There is a map called 1836 Forever Open and Clear. So everything from Michigan Avenue all the way to the lake, there's a map that says 1836 Forever Open and Clear, no buildings. So anytime Montgomery Ward saw someone building in there for 20 years, from 1899 to 1910, he sued them. He went to court 4 times, used his own time, his own money, brutalized by the city government saying, hey, you're stopping progress. The Chicago Tribune called him an icicle. But he won every time, citing the 1836 Forever Open and Clear Act. And if it weren't for him, we would not have those beautiful parks we have today. So I say, thank you, Montgomery Ward. Now, I do a walking tour of the Historic Architecture for Chicago Architecture Foundation. People ask me, wait, hey, how did the artists in Chicago get there? Montgomery Ward did say later in his life that if he knew it was going to be that big, he would have sued them. But right now, we're going to Montgomery Ward. This was the campus. The building we're passing on right now, this is the old administrative office, beautiful Art Deco buildings from 1930. But you see now the main balcony, it is now residential. I do love how if you look at the first floor, they cut out the first floor to create the river walk on this building. There used to be a tunnel that connected this building with this next massive building we're going to be seeing after we cross under the bridge. And that was the big warehouse. This was finished in 1908, designed by Richard Schmidt, who's contemporary of Frank Lloyd Wright. Massive building. Remember, so this is a 1,000-page catalog. That's a lot of stuff. And the style is called prairie style. You see this red belt course going through these horizontal lines, which makes this massive building look even bigger. Now, they used to have guys that worked in here that filled your orders when you're sending a catalog order. They were called pickers, and they used to have to wear roller skates because this building was so big. Of course, now Groupon is in there. I don't think those guys wear roller skates. I think they sit at their computer. Montgomery Ward went out of business in 2001. So now this is all commercial, and then as the building gets bigger, it gets residential. You don't see hanging balconies because this facade is landmarked, and you can't mess with facades, the landmark building. But straight ahead, we are going to see a man-made island called Goose Island. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Goose Island here. It takes its name from this island. Goose Island's a few blocks over at the beer place. This is a man-made island. Our first mayor, Mayor William Butler Ogden, he and his brother had a brick-making company. And the channel on your right, they dug that out for the clay to make the brick. And by 1850s, they had this big island. No one knows why they call it Goose Island, lots of reasons, but it's called Goose Island. But as we're turning, if you look down straight ahead to where the north branch continues, you see a very industrial site. We're going to see a little better as the boat turns. It's called Prairie Home Material Yard 32. This is where they make all the concrete for all these tall buildings going up. But it's a very industrial view. And that's what the Chicago River looked like up until the 20th century. There were nobody lived on the river. There's no commercial building. It's all factories, tanneries, warehouses. It was a working channel. So that's what it looked like down there. So. And as we're turning, if you look at the warehouse, it's now called 601 West. You see where the Groupon sign is? If you look above it, you see that green statue. Her name is called Spirit of Progress, but the guys on the roller skates used to call her Our Lady of Perpetual Discount. I guess at the end they were discounting a lot. They went out of business in 2001. And when Wards went out of business, all these buildings were grabbed up by developers because this was considered a hip place to have a business and a place to live. And the building behind it, that has white shoulders, it looks like, that was the administrative office from Montgomery Ward that they put in 1971. It was designed by the same guy who designed at the same time, One World Trade. Madero Yamasaki was finished in 1971. Now those two corners where you have the Travertine corners, that's where they put all the mechanicals, the elevator. The story was Montgomery Ward didn't want anybody to have a corner office, but by 1971 this guy was long dead, but they kind of kept up with that. But having all the mechanicals in the corners, they said it was very easy to lay up the condos and the office spaces that used to be there before. So now it is residential. We're going back up the North Branch, and over on the right-hand side is the Chicago Tribune Freedom Center. If anybody read a newspaper, I'm talking hardcap copy, whether it's Chicago Tribune, Sun Times, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, over 50 suburban newspapers, this is where they printed it. It's from 1981. Skidmore and DeMero did it, and there's 10 massive mega printing presses that each has 10 caissons that goes all the way down to bedrock because it's so heavy. And the idea, coming up on the right, you're going to see two massive doors, garage doors. The idea was that the paper was going to come in from Canada through the Great Lakes and then go right over these doors and put them right onto the printing presses. But what they found at the edge of the Chicago River, especially at this point, it's only about 90 meters, that they would have to dredge it over the river. And when they did analyze it, it was very toxic down there. And they're like, okay, whoever owns the dredge, we're going to mess up all this dredge. We're not going to do it. They lock these doors. They're never open. The paper comes in on the other side via train or truck. This is a good time to talk about our river. We did not take care of our river like most cities in the 19th century. We treated it like our sewer. Remember I said this was all lined with factories and tanneries? Anything they didn't use, they threw into the river. All of our human waste went into the river. And about 4.5 miles south of downtown was where the Union stockyards are. And I do a World's Fair of 1893 tour. That year we started echoing animals. What they did was they threw it into the river. It smelled like fun. It smelled like fun, let me tell you. So this was a site that smelled stinky, and a mess. There was another problem was our Chicago River, the one where I'm now, the north branch, drains into the main branch when we come down out to Lake Michigan, which is where we got our drinking water. And even though the intake trips for our water was 2 miles out, when they would have a really strong rain, all that dirty, polluted water would get into our intake trips and into our water supply. And this was a problem. A lot of people died of one of our illnesses, typhoid, cholera. And our city leader said, hey, this is a problem where people keep dying. We're not going to grow, really. So they formed in 1889 the Chicago Sanitary District. And they were formed for one thing, and that was to clean up our drinking water, not the river, the drinking water. So we knew how to build a canal, so they decided, why don't we build a canal to reverse the flow of the Chicago River? So on the south branch, there's a river that explains that it's actually lower than Lake Michigan. So they decided to build a canal that was deeper and wider than the canal, and using gravity to pull water off Lake Michigan into this canal to the Des Plaines River, Illinois River that hooked into another Midwest city in Mississippi called St. Louis. They were not happy with us because really, would you want our dirty, stinky water? So we knew this is a huge process. It took 8 years. More earth was moved for this project than was moved later for the Panama Canal. And all along St. Louis, the leaders were saying, please don't do this. We don't want your water. We don't want your sticky water. You know what we did? We dug even faster. And on the morning of January 2nd, 1900, when they finished building the canal, the trustees for the Chicago Sanitary District got up early at dawn, went down, we put a cut in the river, the canal started filling up. And in the morning of January 17th, when the canal finished, they went down early before dawn, and they lifted up this dam, switched, reversed the flow of the Chicago River. Hello, St. Louis. They had pictures of these guys in stop hats. They're so proud of themselves. They come back downtown Chicago, have lunch, and at lunch they find out St. Louis had filed their injunction. St. Louis took it all the way to Supreme Court, but unfortunately for St. Louis, they lost because they could not prove that the Mississippi River was any dirtier because they too threw their junk into the river. At St. Louis, they got even with us. They took our water, turned it into beer, and they sold it back to us. But the Chicago River is so much cleaner than it was 30 years ago. 1979, I said that Chicago's Burnham River. So in the 1970s, we were deemed toxic. We had upgraded to polluted. And in 1970s, we only had 7 species of fish. We now have 70. And you would not have seen kayakers in the 1970s. You would not have seen all these waterfowl. You would see beavers on the river. It's all changed. The river's getting better. And the mayor says in 10 years, it might even be clean enough to swim in. So we are passing, I told you, about 25 bridges. You notice the bridge houses are all different, but engineering on them are all the same. It's called Trunnion Mascule, which is under code W for Chicago Bridge, they call it. It's one where think of like French doors to the sky. Hidden in the riverbank is a counterweight, a small motor moves move it up and down. We're going to be passing the Quincy Street Bridge. It's upright right now. That's the railroad bridge. When we pass by it, on the left, you can see a big yellow counterweight block that's exposed. That's the only one you can actually see on this floor. All the rest are hidden. So up until like the 1970s, all these bridge houses were manned. This is a very active navigation channel. Now we only open them up in the spring and the fall on Wednesdays and Saturdays, starting at 10 o'clock. So all these sailboats can get out to Lake Michigan. It takes about 12 to 15 minutes to move each bridge. And it's really kind of fun to watch that time of year when the bridges are coming through.
That's cool.
We're passing the Kinsey Street, so the next one coming up is the Kinsey Street Railroad Bridge. And it is kept upright all the time because when it's down, it's too low for boats to go under. This is the bridge that all the newsprint used to go to, the Chicago Tribune and the Sun Times. And of course now all the printing has been over here, it's not needed. You can see the yellow counterweight. And they're required by law to lower it once a year just to make sure it's still working, but it's not used. So we're getting back to the confluence of the Chicago River. So over on your left-hand side, this is Wolf Point. This is where frontier Chicagoans used to live. This is like 2 years ago they built this apartment building. First time in 100 years, they're putting 2 more buildings up over the next 3 years. But straight ahead is a building everybody asks about, especially when it was going up. This glass building that has a very narrow base that goes out to 54 stories. Remember when they said we were coming down the confluence? Nothing was built in these 2 buildings for over 100 years because they deemed them buildable. Well, what's going on here with this building? It's called 190 North Riverside, known by its address. Is from a physics standpoint, if you take a normal sized woman in a stiletto heel standing on 1 foot, you got a lot of weight going into a very small base. It's only 47 feet footprint. It goes up to 120 feet at the top. So this is kind of zoned unbuildable because over on your left you got the river. Remember, now you're required to put that river walk. And on the right-hand side of the building, this is where the active railroad tracks. There are 7 railroad tracks that go right behind that building. Actually, when you see that glass coming down, that's over active railroad tracks. So this is Gash Partner working with a brilliant architectural or engineering firm called Magnus and Clemenson. And what they know is actually just at the ground level, all you really need are the elevators and escalators. So what they do is they have this central core spine that holds up the skyscraper. And this spine goes all the way down to bedrock, which is 110 feet, and this building is nailed into bedrock. So this building comes down to 8 stories, and we're going to see some trusses. And those trusses hold up the floors. And the building is transferred down to that spine. Now when I'm done, there's some loud bridge in a second. But they say the amount of weight that the horizontal beam that these trusses hold up is equivalent to 26 fully loaded 747s. And the steel used for these trusses comes from Luxembourg. It was the strongest steel ever used in the United States. It's 40% stronger than conventional steel. Now, one of the benefits of being at Deco Chicago Architecture Foundation, before these buildings open, we're invited to get private tours by the developer, the engineer, the architects. And I had a special interest in making sure this was a strong building because one of my daughters works here, and I wasn't sure that it was safe. But one of the nice things about this being such a small footprint houses came in such modern building with but the next building coming up on the left is the Civic Opera building from 1929, designed by Graham, Anderson, Folks, and White. And you can see the shape of this building. They said it was called the throne. Remember when the 1923 zoning ordinance got to have the pushback to the side? So the developer for this building was a man named Samuel Insel, who was a friend of Thomas Edison. 10% of all utilities in the United States. The love of the opera. This is a man, a 3,600-seat opera house cannot support itself. It's surrounded with 3 towers of office. Now, 1929, not a good time to start your business. The first opera was Aida. It opened up like 6 days after the 1929 stock market crash. Unfortunately, the Civic Opera House went bankrupt, as did Samuel Insel. But in 1954, the Lyric Opera House in Chicago moved in. Very successful, very widely respected opera house, and we're very proud of it. Coming up on the right, we got 2 twin sisters. We're going to talk about mid-century modernism. By Graham, Anderson, Folks, and White. So, remember we were the mail order capital of the world. Besides Montgomery Ward being here, Sears was based out here, Marshall Field, Spiegel's, besides this catalog right now. After you filled out your orders went out to the post office. But I want you to notice straight ahead there's a bridge that expresses vertical anymore. It's all horizontal. It's all done by machines. People don't touch it. It goes into your body. Office, grocery stores, daycare, and then top are condos. So it's changing. So I want to talk about the Great Chicago Fire. Unfortunately, I'm going to point the direction. I did this fence about a month ago, but I'll point out the direction. How many have heard the story of an Irish lady in the Capital area built a house, property seller land, and starts a fire? Not right. Actually, in 1997, the city council exonerated her 100 years after she died. But we do know the fire started in the Larry Bar. It started at Sunday night at 9 o'clock. Background, remember I said we were cities built very quickly, what you usually would? Chicago is cheap, it's fast, it's plentiful. So if you look over to the right, you see those radio antennas, that far back one. To the right of it, there's a building that has an orange roof. I know it's hard to see with the but that's just the direction of where it was. Ironically, the site of the old Larry Barn is now the training academy for the Chicago Fire Department. But it started at Sunday night, October 8th, 1871, 9 o'clock. She was in bed sleeping. Nobody looks at cows at 9 o'clock at night. So the fire started at 9 o'clock, and people thought, oh, it won't go any further in that area. But we had a 90-day drought, and the city mostly built in wood. It was a disaster. And a very strong southwest wind. By 11:30, it was at the river's edge. And then the wind brought it over to the other side and quickly burned down all downtown. It burned from Sunday night at 9 o'clock till Tuesday morning. And when it was finished, we had a population of 300,000. A third of our population was homeless. 300 perished. We lost 17,000 structures. And people said, oh, Chicago won't be built, but they don't know Chicagoans. Very can-do attitude. We started building right away. First thing we did is we took all of our rubble and we threw it into Lake Michigan, creating all this new landfill to support EPA. And if you look to the left, you're going to see a great picture moment, the descendants of the Great Chicago Fire. So if anyone wants to take a picture, it's a great picture moment. So with these tall buildings, we didn't start building them right away. Two things had to happen. Number one, skeletal steel had to be a little bit stronger before we could start building tall. You know, in the 1870s, they were using masonry low-berry walls, where the walls held up the building. In order to build tall, you had to have a very small, a very wide base. So you need that skeletal steel, and then also we need to wait for elevators to be a little safer. So what happened in downtown Chicago, where we call the Loop area, they decided if you're going to rebuild there, you had to use fireproofing material, which made it very expensive to rebuild for the average homeowner. So they moved either south, west, or north, and that land became more expensive, which is why we started building up before a lot of other cities, because our land was so expensive. And probably the most famous skyscraper in the world is that black building in front of you, the one with the white towers. When it was finished in 1974, it was the tallest building in the world. Held that title until 1998. It is called the Willis Tower, which is spelled W-I-L-L-I-S, but Chicagoans pronounce that Sears, because it was really hard for us to call it the Willis Tower. So this was designed for Sears Roebuck, who were the largest retailer in the world, and they had divisions all over the city, and they wanted to combine them, and they wanted to build the tallest building in the world. And so they hired Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, Bruce Graham, and Dr. Fazler Khan, brilliant structural engineer. They just finished the John Hancock building, which is on North Michigan Avenue, the one with the X's. And Sears said, we don't want those X's in our building. We got to think of something better. So Dr. Fazler Khan came what we called the bundle tube. So this building you see, it's 110 stories tall. It's 9 skyscrapers bundled together for strength. You have one pencil, very easy to break. If you take 9 pencils, bundle them together, it makes it a little bit harder to break, a little more strength. Now, the biggest enemy of a skyscraper is the wind. So in order to handle the wind issue, they have these tubes. The skyscrapers end at different levels. So it's 110 stories. So 2 of them end at the 50th story, 2 at the 66th, 3 stop at the 90th story, and 2 go all the way up to 110 stories. There's a story that people were asking, how are you going to do this bundled tube and stop it? Fazler Khan took a pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes and kind of show them this is how we're going to do it. So I want to point out another building, because next year when all these buildings are built, we're not going to be able to see it. It's the Chicago Board of Trade. Over on your right-hand side, the limestone building with the statue sitting on a pyramid. This is from 1930, designed by Fuller and Root, big Art Deco architects. If anybody likes Art Deco buildings, the lobby's open during the week, beautiful Art Deco, you can walk in. But the statue on top is the Roman goddess of agriculture, Ceres, C-E-R-E-S. That's where we get the word cereal from. And it's very Art Deco, stylized face, meaning she doesn't have a nose, ears, and mouth. And the story is that when the artist did that, people said, hey John, why didn't you put a face on your statue? And he said, this is Art Deco, faces are just suggested. And besides, whoever is going to see the face of a statue sitting on a 45-story office building, because this was the tallest point in the city in the 1930s. Little did they know it was going to be built later in Chicago. But over in front of Sears, you see this pink building that's 311, finished in 1990, Cone, Pedersen, and Fox. Now, how would you like to be the architects in the late 80s saying, we want you to build a significant skyscraper that's going to sit in the shadow of the most famous skyscraper in the world? And I love how they went a totally different direction. I called Willis Sears Tower tall, dark, and handsome, and I called 311 pretty and pink. Whereas Sears and Willis is very austere, very simple, with a black tie, guy girl in a black tie. She is a girl, she's lined with this Texas pink granite, and the top, she is lined with all this bling. You can see this building in the skyline. She is meant to be seen in the skyline, because she is all lit up at the top. Actually, when it first opened, when it was lit up, it messed the migratory patterns for birds, but they have to certain times here to lower the lights at the top of this building. I think 311 actually softens the Willis Tower. I don't know that's what I think. Now on this tour, I always have to talk about the Chicago flag. It's white blue stripes with 4 stars. And the stars mean 4 significant events in Chicago, and I want you all to know what they are, because that's what I do. So the first one is the Fort Dearborn. That's where we started, right by the Michigan Avenue Bridge. The second star is the Great Chicago Fire, 1871. The third star is the World Columbian Exposition in 1893. That was Chicago's coming out party. We had 27 million visitors in 6 months. And then we had another fair in 1933-34 called Century Progress. And they said if we did get the Olympics, I know we got a lot of Brazilians, you guys got it. If we got it, they said that would have probably been our 5th star. I was going out of my elevator in my building, and there's this young guy with a tattoo of the Chicago flag. We're going down the floor, and they said, hey, you know the stars thing? He said, no. I'm like, wait, you committed to this tattoo? You have no idea what the stars mean? He knew by the time he got to the bottom. So this building on your right coming up is kind of unknown to Chicagoans. It's kind of very nautical looking. It's called Inway Chicago. It's one big giant slushy machine. So at night when electric rates are low, this building makes 5,000 tons of ice. And it's taken down 15 miles of underground pipes. They go to all these historical buildings in a loop that have been retrofitted for air conditioning. And then the cycle comes back at the end of the day, and it all starts up again. It provides air conditioning to these historic buildings that's cheaper and more economically friendly. So now that you know what this Inway is, one big giant slushy. So this building coming up on the right, this is Vermont building in 1971, and we never talked about it until about 4 years ago. Where they put this map on the front of it. That red dot, that's a "You Are Here." It's got the Chicago River. You see the south branch, you see the main branch on the top, and the north branch. Lit up beautifully at night. We never talked about it until we did the map on here. See, Chicago Tribune architecture critic Larry David said, if you want to put your building on the map, put a map on your building. And now we're talking about it. We're going to be able to see the Willis Tower in a second. How many people on the boat have been on the ledge? Oh, quite a few. I said there's not enough alcohol in the world to get me on the ledge. We've been over, I believe the time still. It's 2009, we put these 4 ledges, and you'll see that in the fastest one in the screen. 4 ledges that we cracked out, that we practiced for cleaning it. I read on the research that over 800 marriage proposals on this ledge. I got married 34 years ago, but it's not this ledge. I told my husband if he would ask me to second help. But where we get between this building, you'll see the ledges. They're taking pictures of you right now. And there's always a mom for it too. So on the left-hand side, remember I called these were called the gateway buildings? So these buildings are built over active railroad tracks. So they're pretty busy now because all these people want to go home because this is getting work. So these buildings are built on what we call air rights. So the railroad owns the land and they sell the rights to the air. Some air rights are bought, some are leased. Leases tend to be about 95 years, about $1 million a year. I know when I did the work on the other side, they went with the narrow base. They bought their air rights. And it's not easy building over air rights. So I know when 150 was building their building for the caissons down, they were only allowed to do that over railroad tracks between 11 o'clock at night and 4 in the morning. Then they just stopped their work. It's not always easy building over active railroad tracks. The next building I'm going to talk about is the Boeing building. On the left-hand side of the boat, you see that square clock tower with the Boeing sitting on. And you see that red, you can see that. There's a red brick building with a clock. To the right is a tall building, and then a smaller one in front of it. So when this was finished in 1990, it was actually for Morton Salt, designed by Perkins and Will, Ralph Jackson, lead architect. So that smaller building that has those steel crosses at the top. So when they were doing, like, how are we going to lay out this building? So on the southwest corner of the Silver building, for those that are directionally challenged, southwest is closest to us to your left. This is where the railroad tracks curve. And so there's nowhere in the southwest corner to put a caisson and pound them all the way down to bedrock. So Ralph Johnson put the challenge out to the engineers saying, how do we solve this? And what they did is trusses on the top actually carry the weight over to the other side. There's no column on that southwest corner. All that weight is carried over to the other side of the building. I love how they didn't try covering up those trusses. They left them exposed. But it was a challenge. This building coming up on the left is from 1929, built at the same time as the opera across the street. So this building on this for the Chicago Daily News is the first building that was built using air rights. Also, the first one to have a public plaza. And I know you were saying in 1929, you said we didn't embrace the river. Why did they have a public plaza? Well, this was the Chicago Daily News building, and they had heavy printing presses, and we didn't have the technology to carry that weight over the tracks, so it was pushed back away from the railroad tracks. And so now this public plaza is thousands of people a day that go through it trying to catch their train. But this was designed by Burnham, who are known for their beautiful Art Deco buildings. So a lot of these new and old building proceedings may have what they call LEED certification. LEED is an acronym for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. Developers, architects, they have not only plenty of buildings dedicated to encourage them to recycle material. They have worked hard to go close to public transportation. They get credit if they recycle the wooden legs along the offices. They got certified silver, gold, and platinum. Chicago's got a lot of things that are noted. I think it's the right thing to do. But I'm going to talk about one big part for recycle one time. A little favorite building with a small top. So, if you go into the Sears Willis building, that is not a rigid building. That building is built to move up to 3 feet or 1 meter here. Typically, it only goes 6 inches. And you might be in that building and you don't feel it's moving, but you go to the bathroom and see the toilet water move around. Now, one thing first I left, they did wind test. They said, hey, wind coming to the west to make this wind and still can sway. Now, structurally it's sound, it's nailed down to bedrock. But swaying in a building makes it uncomfortable for those living in their building. So they came up with the first ever used in the United States. It's called a massive liquid tube damper. At the top of the building, there are 12 massive tanks of water, 200,000 gallons of water. And it's tuned. So if the wind hits the building, the water is tuned to hit it the other way, so there's no sway. It's called a massive liquid tube damper. We are going forward to the confluence of the Chicago River. So straight ahead, you see this really massive building on your right-hand side. Massive building. It's one of the most famous Art Deco buildings in the world. It's the first Dice Mart, finished in 1930. Now it's called the Mart. Designed by Graham, Anderson, Copes, and White. Massive building. It looks juicy and hot. I know there's horizontal lines that's not making that look so massive, but it's huge inside. And Art Deco, it's all about the ornamentation. I think verticality, no, it's the ornamentation. So this building was built for Marshall Field, with a warehouse in it. Now Marshall Field, beloved store in Chicago, is now Macy's. When Marshall Field died in 1906, he had a net worth of about $120 million. A lot of money today, even more in 1906. He left his money to his two grandsons, age 9 and 12. Didn't touch the money till age 50. The money was put into a real estate trust, and this building was built with his trust money. In 1930, not a good time to start a new company. This building did not do well. In 1945, Joseph P. Kennedy, who's the father of our President John Kennedy, bought the building for unpaid taxes of $30 million, which is about a third of what it cost to build it. Turned into a very successful design center. Dice Mart. The Kennedy family sold this building in the 1990s for $625 million, very good return on their investment. Now this building has been rebranded to the Mart, and now they have, besides the facility design center there, but they also have tech incubators inside the farm. They have motor mobility, Yelp. It's kind of become more of a high-tech place. And you can see those bronze busts in front facing the building. These are merchant princes of the United States. We've got Marshall Field, we've got Montgomery Ward, the two heads of Sears, Mr. Wanamaker and Mr. Woolworth. And as good businessmen, they're watching the store. Now we had comedian David Letterman come here a few years ago, and he said that is so cool that Chicago has its own Pez Head Hall of Fame. Coming up on the left is tall steel glass building after the bridge. This building is 300 north of south, and it's got LEED certification at the highest level, platinum. And it got that certification because it takes Chicago River water, they clean and filter it, use it to cool down their cooling system, and then sends it back into the river cleaner than they got it. Also, it recycles, roads and windows, it recycles everything. The whole debate here. And I want to point out a building that if I don't talk about it, people ask later. Straight down the river on the right, you see that green building with the gold top. That's the Carbon Carbide building, finished in 1929. Now it's newly named Hotel Jane after Jane Addams, which is a Hard Rock Cafe. So Carbon Carbide, this is a company that invented the dry cell battery. And Daniel Burnham's two sons, Hubert and Daniel Jr., designed the story. And the story is, developer came out, they went on building a look like. He pulls up a campaign model, very prohibition by extraction. So how about this? But unlike a real champagne model, the top is real gold. The top is real gold. And the green is terracotta. So over on your left, this red building we're passing with the clock tower, it's the Reed Murdoch building. Used to be an old grocery warehouse and it was finished in 1914. Now Britannica and Whirlpool are in here. A lot of the old warehouses would have clocks on them because in the early 20th century, the average worker couldn't afford a wristwatch and just let him know if he was on time. And back then, these bridges were going up all the time from the Ferry Dickie River, so a lot of guys were late going to work because they were bridged. On your left-hand side, behind Chicago, where you see it's like corn cob. This is Marina City, finished in 1959, 1960. This is designed by Burnham, the same guy who did River City on the South Branch, who wanted people to live, work, and play in a city. This is the first building that did that. So he kind of equated these two towers, if they're residential, into like trees, where the central core, elevator core was a tree trunk, the floor plates were the branches, and then the balconies were the petals. These units are all V-shaped, so they get bigger as the balcony. And of course, you got everybody had a boat, so there's marina. And if you notice, tonight you've got parking lot here. If you want to park your car here at UCLA, if you want to know why, Google car flies in Chicago River later and you know why. But it's interesting, money's built up the janitor's union. They want to back downtown. It's all electric building and it's geared towards the middle class. Now they're and I have a friend that lives in this building. He said if you've got the original like 1960 kitchen, it's actually worth more. Like that retro. The next building coming up, AMA Plaza, past the bridge, was moving to Montero's last building. It's called AMA Plaza. It was built for the IBM company. Finished in 1971. After he died, but they said he was out here. His realtor makes sure everything laid out correctly. So this building pretty much spans everything east, top, simple box, flat roof. IBM had some very innovative technology. They recycled the heat coming off the people, the light bulbs, the machine, and they recycled into energy, which made it very expensive, like $40 million to build in 1971. So 2 years later, when we had the oil embargo in 1973, it was 40% less energy than the other buildings. Coming up is the second tallest building in Chicago, the Contextual Tower. There's a lot of stained glass. Concrete buildings. And I want to point out these exterior columns because I'm going to talk about them later on the tour. I'm looking at the clock. I'm quickly building. I've got 25 minutes left. And 1985. It was designed by two New Yorkers, Howells and Hood. It is the building was a result of a big design competition that the publisher for the Chicago Tribune, Colonel McCormick, had in 1922 to build the most beautiful office building in the world. And the winner got $50,000, which is about $1 million today. So there were over 260 designs from over 20 countries, but Howells and Hood did their research. They knew that Colonel McCormick loved Gothic architecture. So they took a Stuart office building and topped it with a Gothic cathedral, and they won. Those elbows coming out are called flying buttresses. On a cathedral, they would be structural, they're just decorative here. And people always ask me about the one next to the onion one. That's the Old Medina Athletic Club. Now it's the Hotel International. That's there also. So the unit gets sold. Now they are converted into condominiums. So, and Tribune moved down to the Prudential building, which is right on Millennium Park on the north side. So over on your left is streamlined verticality with the Peacock, the NBC Peacock on the top. This is the NBC Tower, finished in 1989. Great postmodern building designed by Peter Smith and Seymour Ornington Merrill. I know some New Yorkers on the boat. It looks a lot like your 30 Rock, right? Building. 30 Rock was designed by Raymond Hood, the same man who designed the Tribune building. And you can see the flying buttresses on the side. That's kind of like a shout out to Raymond Hood. Extreme verticality at the front, and then the flying buttresses, which are structural. Even Smith calls it the spirited style, this building. I think it's interesting how architects over the years, how their styles change. So this building was finished in 1989, very postmodern. And then in 2009, he went on to design the Trump, and also the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, which is currently the tallest building in the world. You take the Willis and the Trump and put it on top, that's how tall the Burj Khalifa is. He's also designing the Jedi Tower in Saudi Arabia, which will have third place in this finish. Now remember when we started saying our docks over there that everything built coming forward is all built on landfill? Well, over on your left-hand side, right where you see that Sheridan, this land was bought by our first mayor, Mayor Ogden. And you know, he was a good businessman. He knew, hey, the Port of Chicago, that land's going to be very valuable. So he hires this attorney who failed miserably at politics to schmooze the politicians in Springfield, Illinois, with their state capital, to get this land at a deal. And this lawyer, he needed a job because he had a young family he was raising, but he must have did a great job because this land stayed in the Ogden family until the 20th century. And so the city said, hey, you're not doing anything with it, we're going to reclaim it. And then in 1980, it's a whole new neighborhood. Skidmore, Otis, and Merrill laid out a whole new neighborhood with condominiums, apartments, theater, grocery stores. This is all from the 1980s, all these buildings. That lawyer, by the way, was Abraham Lincoln. So. And over on the right, this is the old Illinois Railroad train. So old buildings from the 1960s. Those are built in A-rights. The rest were built later. So coming up, just to show you about the attitude of how the river has changed. The building coming up after the Sheridan, this red brick apartment building, you look at the front at the bottom, you know, that's where they put parking garage, no windows, pretty flat brick. And then the building built 10 years later, they said, hey, you know what? We could put condos, or excuse me, townhouses in front of the parking garage, and that could be pretty valuable real estate, which is what they did with the next building.
Sheridan Hotel, fourth largest hotel in the city of Chicago in terms of the number of rooms.
I also like to tell people, how do we get the name Chicago? So, it's a Native American kind of name. So when the first early explorers came from, the French explorers came from New France, which is now called Canada, came here, late 1700s, they noticed that there's these really stinky onions growing at the mouth of the Chicago River that Native Americans were using to cook with. And these French explorers said, well, what do you call this? And they said, we call this Chicago. And the French called it Chicago, which is now called Chicago. So it named after a stinky onion. Isn't that lovely? So this farm we're passing on the left, this was designed by Reuben D. Gondoro's grandson, Dirk Lohan, and this commemorates the founding of the group that reversed the Chicago to the river. the 100th anniversary in 1989, Chicago Sanitary District. And it kind of commemorates the flow of the Chicago River, where the center is the mouth. Everything on the right is Lake Michigan, Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence Seaway over the Atlantic. The left side is the South Branch to the Illinois River to Mississippi, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And then there's a little triangle with a water canyon that goes every hour. And that fountain's got a really long name. It's called Nicholas J. Nealis Water Cannon and Centennial Fountain. Can't say that too much. But it's pretty good about the fountain right now. So over on straight ahead of us, this is Lakeshore Drive. This goes all down the lakefront. And people ask me, how did that black building on the other side get built? I thought no private building was supposed to be built on the lakefront. Great question. So the developer for this building is called Lake Point Tower. It was finished in 1968, designed by Shipwright and Heinrich, two students in East Rondeau. So the developer looked at the map of Chicago and realized the city had been very careful about protecting the lakefront over the 26 miles, but not at the mouth of the Chicago River, because the city didn't want to be bogged down by all these legal issues if they wanted to widen the harbor. So this developer saw that loophole, took advantage of it, had every legal right to, build this building, and then when it was finished, Chicago closed that loophole so no one could ever build this the other side of Lakeshore Drive. And when that building was finished, Lake Point Tower, it was 70 stories. It was the tallest residential building in the country at the time. So it's 3 floors. Originally there were 4 floors. So they made 3, and also because it's shaped that way, it kind of helps with the wind issue too. But if you're looking a little farther down, you see our beloved Ferris wheel. This is on the 80 pier. Now this pier was part of the Chicago plan in 1909. Daniel Burnham wanted to put a few piers on the lake to kind of take some of the traffic off this very busy commercial Chicago River. But by the 1930s, most people were coming to Chicago via train, not via boat. So it was very quiet, didn't do very well. And then during World War II, the Navy took it over for pilot training. Our first President Bush did his pilot training on this pier. And then after the war, with the GI Bill, they put a campus on here for the University of Illinois. We kind of jokingly called it Harvard on the Rocks. And it stayed there until 1965, and the university built a permanent campus west of downtown.
Wow.
And then 1990, the city kind of turned it into a big playground. We got Shakespeare's Theater, Children's Museum, and of course our beloved Ferris wheel. So the first Ferris wheel was here in Chicago for the World Columbian Exposition in 1893. A good book about the World Columbian Exposition is Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, for those that want to read more about it. But Daniel Burnham put it before the Chicago Fair in 1893, the Paris Fair in 1889, where they did the Eiffel Tower, and they said, hey, we got to out Eiffel. So they put a challenge, and this guy named George Washington Ferris designed the first Ferris wheel, which actually the wheel was twice the size of this one. And 1.1 million people rode that wheel. And then it moved down to St. Louis for their welfare, and then they dynamited it for the scrap. Too bad it's not here in Chicago, but now we have it here. It's called the Centennial Wheel. And we are turning now, and you can see the Chicago lock that goes out to Lake Michigan. As soon as we turn, you'll be able to see a little better. That was required. So when we reversed the flow of the Chicago River, our neighbors on Lake Michigan were not too happy with us. They were afraid we were going to drain Lake Michigan. So they sued, and they won. And in the 1930s, we were required to put in this lock. The lake water is typically higher than the Chicago River, about 3 to 4 feet. So if you want to go to Lake Michigan, you have to go through this lock. Of course, now I think the boats are coming towards the river. It takes 12 to 15 minutes to cycle through. About 50,000 vessels go through a year, mostly pleasure boats. And as we turn, I'm going to give you a second to take pictures with Chicago skyline, and I never get tired of this view.
I know. Yeah. Look at that.
I can't think of it. You can't. Yeah, I just saw
So Niagara used to be the #1 Chicago tourist attraction. Now Millennium Park is taking over that. So, so downtown is going to be pretty wild tomorrow. Give you warning, Lollapalooza starts. All the teenagers will be sent down to downtown Chicago. So we are heading back. So over on the left-hand side of the river, that those buildings you see is actually Chicago's newest neighborhood. If you look on the city website, we call it the City of Neighborhoods. There are 77 neighborhoods in Chicago. And this neighborhood on the left is from 2002. So it's called Lakeshore East. And these buildings are built around a 6-acre park. And a lot of the buildings have names pertaining to water. We've got Aqua, Chandler, Regatta. And it's our newest neighborhood, and it was designed by Skidmore owned neighbor, the master plan for it. But I want to point out a building, you won't be able to see it once we go under the bridge. It's the third tallest building in Chicago. It's the Aon building. So if you see on the left, you see that big crane with the yellow, it's like a, I don't know what it is, covering, they're working on there. So to the left of that, you see that white building, and the windows kind of look like pinstripes. When this building was finished in 1973, it was the Standard Oil Company of Indiana built it. Now it's an Aon building, designed by Edward Durrell Stone. And this was my favorite building on the skyline. My first building was in the late 70s in downtown Chicago, and they were coming down Lakeshore Drive, and this building was clad in this beautiful white Carrara marble, and it just gleamed in the sunlight. But they cut the marble too thin. And 15 years after it was finished, all that marble started buckling. And they did the studies and said, you know, that marble flies off, it's going to hurt somebody. So they decided to take off all the Carrara marble and reclad it with granite from Mount Airy, North Carolina. And very, very expensive project. So when this building was finished in 1973, it cost about $120 million to build. $120 million. 15 years later, when they reclad it with granite, it cost $80 million. Very expensive problem. So there's something we learned here in Chicago, and that's never take your marble for granted. Okay, I know that is really corny. I only throw that in because I want to see after 90 minutes who's still with me. I'm still with me. So that's currently the third tallest building in Chicago, but that one coming up where you see the construction, it's called Vista. That's going to knock the Aon building on a third place. It was designed by one of our stars, architects in Chicago, it's called Vista. It's a luxury. The bottom part will be a luxury hotel, and the condos above are luxury also. I think they started like $1 million. And we read an article about a month ago. That they've only sold 44%, so you still have time to buy one if you'd like. But unfortunately, this building ruins the views, the $1 million views of Jeannie Gang's other building, Aqua, which I'll kind of point out in a second. You kind of see the undulated balconies behind it. That went Skyscraper the year 2009. Hopefully we'll be able, because this is a smaller boat, I'll be able to point it out and give it people in the front when we get lateral to it. But it's got the undulated balconies so you can see it past. This is a good time to talk more about the Trump Tower. So Trump Tower was designed by Adrian Smith when he was at Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. Adrian Smith is Chicagoan, still building tall buildings. He's got a company called Smith & Gill. And he said when he got the permission to design this piece of architecture, he said what a privilege it was designing a building that was going to stand in a class picture of significant Chicago buildings and architects. Now, although it looks very contemporary, it has Chicago context. So where you see those silver lines, they line up to something important around it. So that lower band in Trump's name, that lines up with the cornice building of the Wrigley building. That's the first building we talked about with the clock tower. Yeah. The second one lines up with Marina City, the corn cob. And the very top one, the third one on the top, lines up with the top of Mies van der Rohe's IBM building. Now, inside those silver bands, it also has a structural component. This building is not a bundle of tube like they had on the Sears. It's called floor and outrigger. So let's say you and I are skiing. So remember when I pointed out those exterior columns? Those are the ski pole. The central elevator core is our torso, and in those silver bands are our arms. thicker at the shoulder, narrow at the wrist, holding up that building. So this building, although you see a lot of steel and glass, it's a reinforced concrete building. So a lot of these buildings being built aren't being built with skeletal steel. They're using reinforced concrete, which is fireproof, allows less columns, it's cheaper than steel, and you can allow more windows. So a lot of new buildings being built, these super skyscrapers are built this way with reinforced concrete. And after you pass this building on the left, which is a Swiss hotel, looks like a triangle. Another by here, Reese, that we're seeing. We're able to see PD Gang's taco building a little bit better. So those undulated balconies, she got the inspiration on the limestone outcroppings on Lake Michigan. So every one of those balconies is different. You can actually stand on it, you can see your neighbors and wave to them. And she used 3 different types of glass. So if you see this building in the distance, it almost looks like water is falling down this building. And because she used 3 different kinds of glass and the undulated balconies, all of them are different, birds can see this building. So not only did it win Skyscraper of the Year in 2009, it won a Peter Award for being bird friendly. It's not only bird friendly, but this one is. So we are we're heading back to the dock. This is the time to take advantage of Captain Tom and his group. So I don't know if it's all on top. There, but it actually works out well on the sun garage for me. But I want to thank you. I am a volunteer docent. Chicago Architecture Foundation. We never ever take tips, but we ask if you like our tour, give us a shout out on social media like TripAdvisor, because that's probably how a lot of you got here. Maybe you can talk some more friends who come on one of our tours. We have about 85 tours. We have walking tours, bus tours, valley tours, we have protocol tours, building tours. It's a great way to see Chicago. Just go on architecture.org and find out more about tours. I call this my volunteer hobby that doesn't cost my husband a penny. But I love doing it. But I want to end with a quote from Daniel Burnham, who said, "Make no small plans, for they have no magic to stir men's blood." And as you can see today, we have not made small plans. We still aren't making small plans. And as far as stirring men's blood, I know to this day, every time I see that Chicago skyline, it still stirs my blood. Thank you. We have to stay seated until we dock. There's still like a flight attendant when I say that, just for safety reasons. So if you could just stay in your seats, we appreciate it. Thank you. And I will be on the dock if you have any questions.
You never run out of space.
So what's next? Yeah. Oh, so then
I know it's early.
Building to our left is going to be the new hall for the Chicago Architecture Foundation. We're moving here August 31st. This is where you're going to be getting all your walking tickets.
Then we're ready for tomorrow. Full day.
Oh, that's fine. Sleeping. Reading and stuff.
If it gets quiet, like we were just sitting there, I was like,
Yeah, no, but it's just very serious. There's the noise of the balls, there's the toast. Yeah,
It's when we were on that end, south. I was like, my head went like that. I didn't even know it.
I'm just gonna get on your
but do we still, okay, because I don't want to be in a nuisance, but do we still have it in us to walk to that beam thing? Because after I saw your pictures, like, I like to see it in the dark and I like to see it in the dark.
It's right there. We can see it like every day. Mary didn't want to go because she's too pretty.
Oh. Is there no restaurant, then there's gotta be a restaurant. I want to sit outside though. Sorry. You guys don't like to sit outside? Oh, I finish always.
No, I like it. Tony doesn't like it.
Sweet baby. I mean, can you imagine your mom? She was You're super friendly. Yeah, I know, right?
Now when I'm hungry.
Sure, but we'll make sure. What's exciting about that?
All right, everybody. Before you get on up to get on out of here, take a moment, look around those seats. Just make sure that you have everything you came on the boat with. Don't want you leaving anything behind. Go ahead and start making your way on down the stairs and out the vessel. Please do watch your step as you do so. Thanks everybody for coming on out. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Yeah, he'll send you the link.
I don't know if I want to see it though.
San Francisco's awesome. We haven't been in a little bit though.
Okay, perfect. Bye.
I guess it depends.
No, what you do just now.
I can find out.
It's in Spanish. It was pretty good, actually. They had a lot of. They're just getting off. Very interesting.
Because you don't know much about this.
She should be in the middle so everybody can hear.
No, but the mic is everywhere.
Michigan. Wait, yeah, I think so. Wait. I
Yes,
think
Michigan,
so.
yes.
Because she said Clark. I don't know. She said
Actually, we should be on the other side. It's going out. We can quote, you know, what's going on.
Oh, you mean on that side?
Because this is going this way, right?
So you're gonna go up the stairs there?
Like this across the street, that's fine.
Tidal water reclamation.
Look at that round one. You know, see the round one on top?
Mhm.
What is that?
It's an onion.
Yeah, it looks like.
Represent Chicago. It's onion.
Oh yeah, chick-cha-cha, whatever they call it. Chick-chu-cha.
Hmm?
The Indians call or the Canadians. Chick-o-boo or whatever. So this is Michigan Ave.
Yeah.
So which way should we be? Just going there?
Yeah, because if we take the bus here, it's going down the way.
So we have to cross. You mean going that way?
Yeah, I say that. No, there are no buses there.
Let's go
Because
cross
there are no
here.
buses there.
The reverse way.
So Chicago is very wide. It's not like Manhattan, which is narrow. You have the-
Narrow by what?
Does it, because you see how the bridge connects them?
These are.
It's much wider. You can't cross the street. Cross there?
Yeah. Play. It's just
Seconds.
It should be. How many seconds? Okay, let's go.
No, because usually it tells you how many seconds you have. That's the Apple
No,
Store.
no, because there's no number there. Some lighter number is out there.
Yeah, then you know how many seconds you have. That's not an Apple Store. You don't have these statistics.
You wanna go there?
I've been there already. That's our bus. We're room 51. Shoot.
It's okay, there's gonna be a
No, there's one. There's another one there. No, that's the one we should have crossed.
It's okay. We'll take the next exit.
Well, I know, but the one is gonna take too long.
See, there are two of them.
I know,
right
but
beside
they're
each other.
both going at the same time.
Read them. Read us.
That's just Mariosa. Come on.
Hey. You're putting too much stress on yourself.
I'm not stressing. I'm just saying.
You know?
Let's get this one. Hopefully he'll let us in.
Route 151, Sheridan to Foster.
I don't know.
Route 151, Sheridan
Yay!
to Foster.
I don't know where to go. What do you do?
Just get up when it stops.
That's good.
I'm gonna call that other place. I think that group one is the group. No.
It's entirely international. I think it's like
Check what?